Brilliant. And do feel free to turn off cameras if you're not comfortable having it on. Typically, I would be monitoring questions in the chat whilst the other person is presenting, but I'll be presenting tonight. So if you do have any questions, feel free to send them in the chat, and then we'll have a chance at the end where I'll answer any questions that you have. So let's get going. If someone could just give me a thumbs up that they've got the thing on full screen, that would be great. I'm not sure. Let me just come off this, I think. Here we go. Is that better? Has that come back up? There we go. I think that's better. Great. Thank you. Brilliant. Okay. So yeah, tonight's session is all about making a trailer for your Brighton Fringe show. My name's Maddie. I work in the Artist Services department, previously called Participant Services if you've performed with us before. And I'm the marketing coordinator. So I help with everything from setting up your venue or event right through to sort of getting Brighton Fringe marketing for your event. So where we do things like posters around town and bits like that. So that's just the same introduction that was on the website, just basically saying that this session is just to show you sort of making a trailer to make it a bit simpler without any budget at all, and how you can make that possible. So this is just a little bit about me. So outside of Brighton Fringe, as with a lot of the team, I'm also a creative. I make films and I also do photography and stuff like that. My recent film, that poster in the middle, Monsters, has been part of 10 festivals and up for 2 awards. I'm also part of Project Ours, which, if there are any other filmmakers here, it's a group in Brighton for gender non-conforming and female filmmakers, where we sort of host workshops and do screenings and stuff like that. And I've also studied film and had some mentorships around that. So that's just a bit of background about me. And then onto the workshop. So why is it important to make a trailer? For starters, we all know that marketing is a key point in getting audiences at your Brighton Fringe event. It's arguably the most important part of the process to make sure that you get bums on seats or reviews or anything like that. So in terms of marketing, as you'll probably know from your own personal use or creative use, videos are sort of the way forward, the way that social media is going. Facebook algorithms, Instagram algorithms all push video content, especially since stuff like TikTok has got so big. They now realize that people do engage with videos more so than they might a long caption on just a picture. So in terms of marketing, videos are a great way to get your show seen by a bigger audience. Similarly, on the topic of audiences, having a trailer gives them a bit of confidence around your show. It sort of gives them an idea of what you as a performer may be like, what your set might look like if you're a theatre performance, the type of jokes or comedy you'll be sharing if you're a comedian. And obviously, if you're a filmmaker, then you'll be used to making trailers to sort of give people a snippet of what your film is about. So it just, with the sort of the amount of events there are at Fringes, at R1 there was 880 last year, and at Edinburgh this year there was nearly 4,000, all in the space of sort of 5 to 4 weeks. So having that trailer will give people the confidence to choose your show over another show. Along with that, for funding and development opportunities, having a trailer is great. A lot of people on applications will ask for a video, a link to either a YouTube performance, a clip from a previous show, a trailer, something to give them a sort of visual taste of what you're like as an artist and performer. So if you're trying to, you're doing Fringe and then you're hoping to make bookings afterwards, if you can get some video content from that, it's really good for sending to other venues or festivals or things like that. Here's a few trailer examples. So the first one that I'm going to play you, these are both from Brighton Fringe shows last year. Fabulette 1933. I thought this one was quite nice because it's about 16 seconds long. It's very simple. It's just a few sort of short snippets from their play with very short taglines from reviews that they got, and the stars underneath. If you don't have reviews, you can also get audience feedback. That's a really good thing to have as a quote on a video. But this is just an idea of a simple trailer. So as you saw, as I said, it was very short and sweet, but you got a sort of idea that it's probably a serious piece of theatre, not like a comedy show or a clowning show or something like that. So it will attract those types of audiences. This next one is about a minute long, and it's a much more professional looking video. They've probably had videographers in and an editor and stuff like that, just to give you an idea of what the other side of trailer making might look like. And either of these trailers are great to have. It doesn't need to be the more professional one, but I just thought I'd give you some examples of what the differences can look like.
Welcome to the gap, the yawning abyss between ice and fire where the 9 worlds vie for power. Our story starts here. Ships don't bigger and the waves are skimming barren, stomachs to the bird and the flames. Each other and it's a new beginning, rise and drink. Of yours and the ice cold burn, Spain and sword. But daring, conference, and like a fated turn and shield and fear.
So yeah, that's quite an intense trailer, but theirs is a wrestling theatre show. Some of you might have seen it in Brighton last year. I didn't get a chance to, sadly, but yeah, it's obviously the show itself is quite full on, and they show that in the trailer. They show the sort of slamming of the wrestlers and the stuff like that to give you an idea of the sort of the thrills that you're going to see. People that I sort of spoke to who saw the show just said what like the wow factor of it all, and I think that trailer's done a good job of showing that. So if your show is about sort of wow factor, it's really good to get that across in the trailer so that audiences who want that type of thing will see it and go, that's something I'm interested in. This again, as I mentioned, social media is a good thing to consider when making a trailer or video content. So this was just to give an example of what different content might look for if you're doing a trailer for YouTube versus sort of a funny thing or a short thing on Instagram to try and get ticket sales. This is from Simon David, who's performed at Brighton Fringe for a few years now. So this first one I'll show you is just I think it's post Fringe, a sort of trailer of what the show was like, I think, because it was going up to Edinburgh.
Seriously, a white gay is someone who yells "Yas, Queen" at literally anything. Literally, "Yas, Queen, you inhaled. Shut up!" Capitalism is bad, okay? Right? iPhones. So, no. He is hating the show. Oh, look, a piano. I play piano. How random. Oh my God. Crazy.
So yeah, that did a great job of showing the type of comedy that you'll see in a Simon David show. Obviously had some audience reactions with the laughter and the clapping, some quotes from audiences on the screen, and then ended with the dates. So that's a really good sort of model of what a trailer could look like. Versus this is just an Instagram post for a show this year that Simon did in London.
We're outside the Glitch in Waterloo, where we're protesting for more queer comedy shows in London performed by me. What do we want?
A moving hilarious show about your deceased father.
When do we want it?
Thursday, the 20th of April.
How much do we want to pay for it? £10. £8.50?
£5.
The people have spoken. Book your tickets.
So again, just giving an idea of the show and the type of comedy you'll see, but in a different sort of format, a format that will do well on social media, where it's just a shorter content with a sort of straight to the point punch. So what should you consider when making a trailer? We've touched on it already, but audience and genre. So who are you trying to attract to your show, and what genre would your show fall under? Obviously, if you're doing a serious theatre piece, like we saw with, well, Mythos Ragnarok is sort of theatre and wrestling, but sort of more intense side of theatre, versus Simon David, which was a comedy show, you can see sort of how those trailers differed. Mythos was all about sort of showing the spectacle of it and the theatrics of their acting and their costumes and stuff like that, whereas Simon David's one was more about showing the type of comedy, the sort of silliness of it, and the humor that you can expect from a Simon David show. So these are good things to think about when you're making your trailer. Even things like the sort of music that you're going to put to it. If it's a light-hearted comedy piece, the music will be much more upbeat. If it's a sort of horror show or a theatre show or something like that, it might be a bit more intense in the music. So it's just thinking about things like that. Again, where will it be shared? So depending on if you're putting it on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, it will be slightly different. So that was shown in the previous slide where we looked at sort of YouTube content versus Instagram content. And it's just considering sort of, obviously on Instagram, you might want something a bit shorter, a bit snappier to the point. Whereas in YouTube, you can go into it a bit more. You could have, say, a minute-long trailer where you show snippets from the piece and then quotes from press or audience, some funny jokes, and then sort of where people can buy their tickets and dates and stuff. So it's just really good to consider what platform you're making it for. Again, the pace. So the pace of the trailer will depend on who you're trying to attract and what type of show it is, but ultimately you do want to interest them. So you want to go in with something punchy, you want to get their interest straight away, particularly for social media, but even for a trailer. If people are scrolling the Brighton Fringe website and looking for an event to go to, if they click into yours and they watch the trailer, you really want to grab their attention straight away. We'll talk a bit more about how you could do this in a minute. But it's just sort of considering maybe like how you're going to open it. Is there a really good part from your show or a really good sort of video you've got from rehearsal that would sort of pull people in and make them want to watch the rest of the trailer? Can you end it on a cliffhanger so that they're interested in what happens? Things like that. And again, the sort of the music and the sounds that you use in the trailer will also change the pace and sort of what genre it falls into and bits like that. Finally, what is the outcome of your trailer? What are you hoping to achieve with it? If you're looking for it to be a trailer for your Brighton Fringe show, then it's important that you obviously mention the dates, the prices, where they can see your show, the fact that it is part of Brighton Fringe, all things like this. Whereas if it's something for funding and development, maybe you just want to show sort of what you've achieved from your Brighton Fringe run. So you want to get audience quotes, maybe interview them after the show. If you've got any reviews from press, you would want to put a quote in there and the stars if you got a star rating. and as well if you won any awards or had any laurels that you could put on it. And then at the end of it, sort of, you know, maybe mention that you're looking to tour and where you'd like to see the show go, things like this. So next, now that we've considered sort of why we're making the trailer, and what our audience might be and things like that, here's just some examples of how you could get footage. So as I mentioned at the start, I don't want anyone to come out of this thinking they have to spend loads and loads of money to get a trailer made, and that they need to put aside loads of their budget to get a videographer and an editor and all things like this. Obviously here there's the professional side of it. So, you know, if you do know someone who creates films or works in social media or things like that and would be happy to get some content for you, then by all means ask them to help you out. The sort of spirit is Fringe is getting your friends involved and getting everyone to help you out with your show. If you had a photographer come to a previous show, it's worth using those photos, getting those in there. Or if you had a videographer, if you were part of a festival and they were capturing content for their socials, can you repurpose some of that? And as well, if you've got a show where it does have, you know, really exciting props and sets and stuff like that, costumes, then show these off in the trailer. You know, if people will come in to see a really exciting theatre piece, then, you know, if you can show them sort of that the whole setup is going to be wow, then that's gonna encourage them to come along. But on the flip side of that, you can do it all very much yourself. Most people have a phone now, and most phones have really good cameras. A lot of actual film cameras now will promote themselves by saying that it's better than an iPhone camera. So obviously people like Nikon and Sony are aware that phone cameras are somewhat replacing video cameras for people who don't necessarily need it to do anything too professional, but just want to capture stuff like their shows or their day-to-day lives. So yeah, make the most of your phone. And as we saw in some of these trailers, you really can get creative with how you're going to get the content. So, you know, if it's just standing outside of the venue and getting your friends to like do a pretend protest, or if it's getting some of your friends to record you whilst you're doing a rehearsal in your living room or something like that. We had from 2023 a show called Fridays, which was set in a fish and chip shop, where it was all about getting the sort of rights back to this fish and chip shop that belonged to their family. So before their Fringe run, they went around local fish and chip shops and they reviewed them on their social media. So that's a good way for them to sort of get some marketing from the chip shops, and as well just sort of plays into their themes of their show. So that's sort of quite an inventive way of doing it. And yeah, keep it simple. You know, if you don't have rehearsal space that you can use or professional footage of any of your shows, then just, you know, if you've got a wall like this, like I'm sitting with, if you can just sort of get this plain background, or if you can, I've previously like hung a bed sheet up that's white to get a background for photos, and you'd be surprised how professional it can look. It can look like a studio or that if you just do it right. Similarly with lighting, you can just use natural lighting. If you've got some good natural lighting coming in, don't worry about getting like professional lighting set up. Just do what you can to get a trailer, because something is often better than nothing. If you can then put it on social media and put it on your event listing, it then gives audiences a chance to see what you and your show are all about. So in that same vein, these are editing softwares that are all free. I've purposely put a range of sort of expertise on them. So there's stuff like Canva, which is very user-friendly. They have a lot of video templates. You can search like birthday reel for Instagram and it will probably come up with a template. Or I don't know, you might even be able to search show trailer and it will probably come up with a sort of template that you can use. It's very much just sort of drag and drop, just like cropping and stuff like that. It's nothing too much like color grading or anything expert like that. It's literally just the bare bones of what you'd need to make a trailer. iMovie is also sort of quite a simple one. It's got a few more features than Canva. It has sort of some effects that you can put on it and sound effects for the audio and stuff like that. But ultimately it is still quite simple and user-friendly. It can just be a bit limiting sometimes with the dimensions. They don't really like you doing stuff in portrait mode. So it can be a bit frustrating if you're trying to make something for Instagram or anything like that. It's not necessarily the best option. The only way I've got around this before is by doing it sideways and then exporting it and rotating it in my photos. So that is an option, but it's not always the most easy. CapCut, this is actually made by the people who've made TikTok. So it's generated more so for social media video, but it's actually quite a good piece of software. As you can see there, it looks quite similar to iMovie, or almost like an in-between of DaVinci and iMovie. So it's got a few more features, and it's aided by AI. So it sort of maybe might suggest ways of editing for you. And it will sort of like keep things simple and also just sort of frame them for social media if that's what you're looking for. Finally, the most sort of expert software on here is DaVinci Resolve. This is made by the people who make the Blackmagic cameras, which are really good filmmaking cameras. So this software is a bit more complicated. I would suggest if you're unfamiliar with editing software, it might not be the best one for you, as it's got a lot of unnecessary buttons for something like this. Really, when you're making a Fringe trailer, all you need is the ability to drag and drop something in and then just crop the length that you want it and add some text. That's really all that you're looking for, unless you're wanting to make sort of a high-end trailer. But even in stuff like Canva, you can do that. It just means that you don't get confused by too many buttons and where's the clip and where's the crop and all of this. But if you are looking to do something a bit more complicated, then DaVinci Resolve is great. It is actually used to make some Hollywood movies. I think Pacific Rim used it. And it's all free as well. So it might be worth just starting simple and then downloading the more complicated software if you get more confident or find there's a feature missing that you're looking for. So here is a trailer template, because I've spoken a lot, and I don't want any of it to get lost. So I just wanted to keep it really, really simple and just give you the tips for the essential bits to put in a trailer. So as I mentioned, you want in the sort of first 5 to 10 seconds, you really want to grab their attention. So how can you hook them in? There's a screenshot there of Mythos Ragnarok, because theirs sort of started quite, I don't know, quite edgy, quite spooky. You're sort of thinking, oh, what's going to happen here? And you're intrigued. You're intrigued because it's purposely a little bit vague, but it looks like something interesting is about to happen. So that's one way of doing it. Or the Simon David stuff, that went in straight with like a joke, followed by a few more jokes, but it instantly gave you a sense of his type of comedy. And with the Fabulette one, that again, it just popped up straight away with a little trailer, a little video with some reviews. I'm going to show you one in a minute. So this middle one is from a show called A Pirate's Life for Me by Max Norman. That was at Fringe last year. And this one has some really good audience interaction in it. So he came to Brighton and then went up to Edinburgh. And what he did in Brighton was manage to get some content to promote his Edinburgh show, which is what a lot of artists do if you're sort of going from Brighton Fringe onto another thing. So yeah, this is another option, is you can do sort of in the bit after the hook, you can then do a bit of audience interaction, getting some feedback, or if you do have press, putting in some reviews from press and stuff like that. So you've gone from showing them a little bit of the show to then showing what others thought of it, to give them a sense of, you know, this is a good show, go and see it. And then in the last bit, again, it does depend if you're looking for development opportunities, and if this is your first time performing and you don't have any laurels or reviews or anything like that to put on it, then that's absolutely fine. But if you're looking to make a trailer after Brighton Fringe to send out to potential festivals and venues, then a really good thing to include is any laurels or achievements, funding, things like that. So this, in the top screenshot, you can see they've sort of got all the people who have funded it. Some Brighton Fringe performers are lucky to get Arts Council funding or crowdfunder or stuff like that. So you can just pop that at the end. And again, it gives audiences that sense of, oh, well, if it's been funded by these people, then it must be a good show. But if you don't have any of that, then end it with the dates. Either way, it's probably good to end it with the dates unless it's a post-Fringe development type of trailer. But ending with the dates, just sort of like the Simon David one did, just saying at Comedia, 22nd to 29th of May, £10 tickets at this time, just so that audiences know where to go and when to get your tickets. Here's a few more trailer examples. I won't play them all, and this first one that I'm going to show you, I might not play all of it because I think it's about 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes. But this is just a different example of a comedy. It's like a silly, more of a clowning type of comedy. And just look at sort of the pace of it, the type of music they've used, the shots they've chosen, and bits like that. If you are in the clowning or the silly comedy, alternative comedy sort of genre, this is a good example.
Me? I'm Steve. You lying beafish.
Yeah, so that gives you an example there. Their music is obviously quite fast paced. It's very Western, it's very silly. And then it's paired with sort of these shots of them doing silly things on stage. Really good use of sort of making the music in time with their movement, pausing it at certain points and then starting it up again. So that's a really good use of music in a trailer. This one is the one I mentioned, A Pirate's Life for Me. So this one is really good for the audience feedback. It's quite a sentimental show. It's very silly. It's not a kid's show, but is sort of about childhood and finding that nostalgia of childhood as an adult. So the trailer kind of gives you an example of that. And then it's the audience feedback in this one is really what I want you to pay attention to.
Yes.
Childish. You're just gonna like come away feeling really good about yourself.
Really funny.
So funny.
Completely got me where I didn't expect it.
Jimmy and I together forever. Chuck. It was amazing. I feel brilliant. Time for sentimentality on this adventure. We have work to do. All the interaction, like everything he did, just like playing with the audience.
So you can see him.
Don't come and see him. Don't see him. He's funny.
So yeah, I think the audience interaction in that one is really good to take note of. And also just the fact that it is clearly done by sort of friends or family members who have been able to film it. It doesn't quite look as sleek and professional as some of the others, but I think it does give that sense of joyful childishness and just a fun time. You know, going to see that show, you're going to have a fun hour. And that's really what that show's about. So it's showing what you want audiences to experience at your show and evoking that in the trailer. we've got quite a bit of time left, so we'll actually show you these other two as well. These are both Edinburgh shows. The first two were Brighton shows. They're both part of the Horizon Showcase in Edinburgh. This first one is gig theatre, so theatre with music, a bit of like theatrical performance. This one is, I won't spoil it just in case you do get a chance to see it because it's very good, but it's about a Jehovah's Witness being kicked out of the community for being gay, but not necessarily a sad tale at all. So just sort of keep that in mind when watching it, sort of what it's about and how that's shown in the trailer.
Don't be careful. Wasn't my choice. I chose to obey. But nothing's holding me down now. No, it wasn't my choice. I chose to obey. Nothing's holding me down. I've got so much to say to you.
Yeah, so I mean that one definitely hits the mark where I was saying about sort of bringing people in instantly. It's obviously gig theatre, and the song they chose to put at the start, the bass just sort of feels very fun and funky, and the sort of pace of it where it's just like the words, and then a tiny bit of trailer and then more words. I think that's a really good way to pull people in, especially for something music based, to sort of make the most of that music when editing it. And it obviously showed a bit of sentimentality at the end, to show you that it's not necessarily all going to be upbeat and happy, but that it's sort of going to also make you feeling a little bit emotional, and connecting with the story. This last one is one I really wished I got to see, mainly because of the trailer. The trailer really sold it to me, but unfortunately I didn't get to see it. But this is theatre dance performance by Bullyache, called Tom. It's all about a drag pageant, and sort of stuff like that, but it's yeah, it's a bit of a serious piece, so you can sort of see that in the trailer. This one is definitely the sort of more high-end professional one, that I'm going to show you. It was the one a minute ago that had sort of all the funding people, so obviously this is what you can do if you get a lot of money, but this isn't what I'm expecting everyone on this call to do. I just thought it was a really good example of a Fringe trailer that's slightly higher end. So yeah, as a dance piece, it sort of showed off a lot of the movement was what the trailer centered around, and it also got the different sort of aspects of the show in there. It sort of started off quite sentimental, showed quite a bit of fun and seriousness, really gave a great overview of the whole show. So yeah, those are some of the best examples that I could find. And just now to sort of summarize what we've spoken about today. So what should you consider when making a trailer? So obviously a big point that we spoke about was audience and genre. This will completely sort of dictate the type of trailer you're going to create, the music you're going to use, and the pace of it. Hopefully watching those examples just now just showed you sort of the different pace that a different genre or style of event will use. If we compare like Sleeping Trees Western trailer, where it was fully fast paced and there was a lot going on, to maybe the Bully Ape Tom show, which was very slow-mo and showing you the sort of sensuality and the dance moves and stuff like that. Very different comparisons, but obviously completely accurate for what they're trying to sell. So think about how you fit in there. What resources you have available to you. So as I said, it's not anything to worry about if you don't have a fancy camera or someone who can edit for you. There's loads of free editing software. Mobile phones are great for recording. And if you've performed before, just look at sort of footage that people in the audience might have captured and tagged you in, or a photographer might have got. Just really think about sort of how you can repurpose stuff from old shows, performances, or if you don't have anything at all, just sort of how you can use the space around you, whether that's outside of a venue like Simon David did, or in your living room, like I mentioned, with just sort of either a blank wall if it's sort of you want to just show a bit of the theatre piece, or if you're a musician, something like that. Or if you are based in Brighton, make the most of places like the beach and sort of sell your Brighton Fringe show as part of the Brighton destination. Just think about sort of get creative with where you could film and how you can get the content, but don't worry about it needing to cost you money. It shouldn't cost you money to have to get footage of yourself as a performer. A really important point is sort of how can your show stand out. As I mentioned, there's so many shows to choose between, and it's really making sure that obviously stuff like your listing copy is good on your event, so you really explain what it is and that you have a good picture, but stuff like a trailer will be really useful as well. If people are combing through the sort of 800 events or 4,000 events if you're going to Edinburgh, then being able to watch a 30-second or a minute long trailer will give them an idea of whether your show is good for them or not. So yeah, if you're a comedian, get your jokes in there, show sort of how audiences have reacted to it, get audience interaction if you've done the show previously or from a past show, just sort of what people thought of you as a performer. If you're a show that's centered around sort of physical performance or dance or wrestling, then try and get some of that in there to show people the spectacle of your show and the wow factor. And again, if you're sort of a theatre show with a very specific style or period or sets and props, try and use those where you can. Finally, what are you hoping to achieve with the trailer? So I sort of touched upon you might be making something slightly different if it's for pre-Fringe and you're trying to sell tickets, or if it's post-Fringe and you're trying to get funding and development. So, you know, you can use the same trailer and just change it up a bit. If you make a show to sell tickets and then want to change that into a trailer to sort of get development opportunities, you know, maybe get some audience interaction that you can get in there, or add any press reviews or any like awards or laurels or quotes and stuff like that. Just think about sort of how, if you've already done the work to make a pre-Fringe trailer, how you can then edit that to also be a post-Fringe trailer. That is all from me. I'll now stop rambling and open up to questions. Let me just come off of this. Here we go. Yeah, so hopefully you found that useful. I'm obviously, as I mentioned, I'm part of the artist services department, so if you do have any questions, I'm on the takepart@brightonfringe.org email, and I'll be the one. If you call the artist services department, it'll be probably me or one of my colleagues who answer to help you with the event, so you can easily contact me there. But yeah, if anyone does have any questions now, we covered quite a lot, so hopefully we can get some questions out of it, but no worries if not. Yes, Rosa.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I've got my camera off because I'm a bit ill today. But that was really helpful. I was wondering like what your opinion was on making trailers that don't necessarily include footage from the show, but are more like concept based. Because I think with our show, there's like an element of mystery where we don't want people to know what the actual show is going to be like. So doing more of a kind of concept based thing where it's like actually different from the content that you'll be seeing, but kind of getting across like maybe like an interview with a character or like a kind of like more physical because it's sort of like horror comedy, so doing more of like a physical sort of trailer with sort of slow motion and stuff. Like, yeah, I don't know what your thoughts on
Yeah,
on
no, absolutely. I think that's really important that you sort of mentioned that it's what your show is about. And if your show is about mystery, of course, you don't want to give it away. You don't want to show the set and what's going to be going on. So no, absolutely. I think that's the sort of the whole point of a trailer is to show what your event is about specifically. So yeah, maybe an interview with a character could be really interesting. You see silly sort of clips. I can't think of a good example. I'm just thinking of What We Do in the Shadows, but where they have like the interviews with all the characters on that, something like that might be really good for you, if that's the sort of vibe you're going for. If it's all about horror, maybe something happens off screen and then you're like interviewing someone, something like that could really be good. And definitely, yeah, will attract the sort of audiences that would enjoy your show.
Thanks so much.
It's all right. Anyone else?
Hi,
can
yeah. Oh, sorry. You go.
No, you go
first.
I was just going to ask about timings, just checking what you said about timings and what's like an ideal. Did you say a minute for a YouTube thing and sort of 30 seconds for Instagram?
Yeah, I mean, it can vary, but I think sort of 30 seconds to a minute is probably good for YouTube or for like your event listing, because that Sleeping Trees one was about a minute and a half, but once it got to the minute point, it sort of felt like it could have ended. So I don't think you want to do it too long, but I think, yeah, probably 30 seconds to a minute is good for a longer YouTube video. And then for Instagram, yeah, maybe sort of 15 to 30 seconds. You can do a bit longer, but I think people tend to watch videos for sort of 5 to 10 seconds. So if you go much longer than that, you're going to be making something that people probably aren't going to watch. So yeah, I would say sort of 15 to 30 seconds for a social media, and then 30 seconds to a minute is good for longer YouTube, or Facebook would probably work with a longer video, but I think sort of Instagram and TikTok, you'd want to keep it shorter.
And are people still using Facebook, or is it more just Instagram now and YouTube?
I think it depends on your demographic. I would say Facebook does tend to be sort of 30 up. I still use Facebook and I'm in my 20s, but not so much as I would use Instagram, or a lot of people my age would use TikTok and stuff like that. So I think it depends who you're trying to attract. But I would say there are quite a lot of fringe networking groups and performer groups on Facebook. So I would say for fringe shows and for like making an event listing and stuff like that, people definitely still use Facebook.
That's actually exactly what I was going to ask. So,
oh, is it?
That's great.
Did you want to ask anything else?
Well, with TikTok, I mean, is that a particular age group? Because I want to do a show for families, for young kids, So I'm just wondering what the best platform would be.
I would say typically for parents and mums, I would say it's usually Instagram or Facebook. TikTok does tend to skew younger, for sort of young adult or teenagers, stuff like that. I would also say don't wear yourself out trying to do every social media. If you can do an Instagram and a Facebook, that's great. I don't think you need to worry about having a Twitter and a TikTok and everything. I think as well with Facebook, the good thing is you can find groups for local communities. So I mentioned obviously Fringe performers, but there'll also be sort of children events, Facebook groups like children events in Brighton, children events in Hove, stuff like that. So that's a good chance where you can then sort of drop your trailer in there and say, my show's happening on these dates, or make an event listing and share it into the groups. So I think it's helpful for that sort of thing.
Thank you.
No worries.
Do people still make pages for their Facebook shows, or is it sort of groups?
No, yeah, it really depends on the performer. Some of them do. I've definitely seen last year there were quite a few Fringe performers with Facebook pages. Some will just use their personal, but others will sort of still make a page, just because then you can reach more people if it's not your personal account. And I think to make an event that's public, you'd need your own page as well. I'm pretty sure. I think if you made an event from sort of your own personal, I don't know if you can let people that aren't your friends view it. And on that note, if you do make a Facebook event, then you can ask Brighton Fringe to be a co-host, and then it will show up on like our events section as well.
So you ask if you create an event.
Yeah, so
say?
if you make an event that's public on Facebook, you can then ask Brighton Fringe to be a co-host.
Right, that's cool. And do you know much about Instagram ads? Whether you can run your trailer as an ad type thing?
I've not personally used Instagram ads too much.
Why not?
I think you just choose a post that will be shared. So if you do it as like the trailer is your post, I think you could then choose that to be the ad.
Right. Okay.
I've definitely had like ads come up that are videos, so I'm pretty sure you would be able to.
Do you think they work sort of better and is worth spending on rather than just normal sort of Instagram posts and reels and stories and stuff? Do you think the ads? Have you got any experience of whether they?
As I say, I'm not the most sort of familiar with ads. I've not done too much of the sort of paid social stuff.
No, I haven't.
No, but I mean, you can obviously choose the demographic. You can make it quite specific with who you want it to target. So arguably it might get you more views than if you just posted. But at the same time, if you can sort of post it and then share it out to groups, Facebook groups or that of people that would be interested, then they might reshare it. I think it really depends on the budget, whether it's going to be worth it or not. But we do
Facebook ads again.
Yeah, I was gonna say we'll have a marketing Fringe Academy coming up soon.
Okay, cool.
Post Christmas, probably sort of February, March time.
Great.
And on our YouTube, we've also got the one from last year.
Yes.
So that will cover a lot more of the sort of, I can't remember how much we went into paid socials, but it will cover a lot more about general Fringe marketing strategies. So that's worth a watch.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries.
I've actually used Facebook ads quite a bit, and I've found them really good value for money because you can be so specific about who you're targeting. What I tend to do is use that for targeting people outside Brighton.
Okay.
Seaford, Shoreham, etc. And I found it very, very effective.
That's good. Yeah, I know you can run it for like quite a few days for just a few pounds and that, so it's not too expensive compared to other bits. But yeah, definitely worth considering. Did anyone else have any questions?
Hi, just wanted to say sorry for being so late. My computer
Oh, that's all right.
meltdown for the first 20 minutes of the meeting. I was just wondering if there was any way of being able to catch up on what I missed. Is it possible to access either this recording or the slideshow?
Yeah, so I mentioned at the start, but every Fringe Academy is recorded and put on our YouTube channel. And then we also tend to upload sort of the presentations as well. So if you go onto the Fringe Academy section on our website, which is in the sort of header bar, and then scroll down to the bottom, there's a section with all of the ones from this year, the like recordings and the PowerPoints, and then also the ones from last year. and they're on our YouTube channel, which I think is Brighton Fringe TV, where you can catch this one. We've had 3 or 4 others this year already, and then you can get last year's ones as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That's answered my next question as well. So
Oh,
perfect.
okay.
Thanks, Maddie.
Amazing.
Cheers.
No worries. Anything else? Anyone got any other questions from any of that?
Sorry, could you just repeat the website again? Was it Brighton Fringe? What's it? Brighton Fringe TV?
Yeah, that's our YouTube. And then the Brighton Fringe website, I think it's just brightonfringe.org.
That's great.
.org.uk. But if you search Brighton Fringe in Google, it should come up.
Thank you. That's great.
Brilliant. Okay, well, if that's everyone's questions, I think we might wrap up there. But as I mentioned, you can contact me on takepart@brightonfringe.org. So if you have any follow-up questions about any of this, just drop me a message. I will upload this video hopefully by tomorrow afternoon, as well as the presentation, which will obviously have all of the sort of software and trailer examples and stuff like that in it, and the key points to consider. Yeah, thank you for coming along. I'm going to stop the recording now.